For years, Tamela and David Mann seemed like gospel music's golden couple, a picture of faith, family, and unshakable love. But behind the polished performances and joyful stage presence, something far more complicated was unfolding. In a stunning turn of events, Tamela is now speaking out, revealing truths that have shattered that perfect image. And in a development no one saw coming, David Mann has been arrested, sending shockwaves through the gospel world and leaving fans questioning everything they thought they knew. What really happened behind closed doors? The illusion is breaking, and the truth is finally coming to light. The shattered illusion of gospel's golden couple. For years, Tamela and David Mann were held up as the very embodiment of Black love and gospel grace, a couple who not only survived the temptations of fame, but seemingly thrived under its spotlight. From the church pews of Texas to the Hollywood stages, they carved a lane of wholesome faith-based entertainment, captivating millions through their music, ministry, and media presence. Tamela's powerful soprano, best known from her soaring ballads like Take Me to the King, became the soundtrack of Sunday mornings across the nation. David, with his warm comedic timing from shows like Meet the Browns, completed the picture of spiritual unity and familial strength. Together, they weren't just a gospel couple. They were the gospel ideal. The Manns graced magazine covers, co-headlined national tours, and filmed reality television that showcased what many saw as the dream, a marriage grounded in prayer, humor, and divine purpose. But behind this curated image of perfection, something far more complex and ultimately tragic was unraveling. Those who idolized the Manns never imagined that their beloved gospel queen might be suffering in silence, that the same woman who gave voice to millions might not have a voice in her own home. The illusion of harmony, crafted so carefully over decades, would not simply fracture, it would implode. And when it did, it would reveal a deeply troubling tale of exhaustion, manipulation, and a desperate search for freedom from within the very walls of a gospel empire. Behind the curtain, Tamela's silent struggle. As Tamela's star continued to rise through the 2000s and 2010s, fans marveled at her seemingly boundless strength. Whether performing under the scorching lights of megachurch stages or on grueling cross-country tours, she rarely missed a beat. Her faith appeared unwavering, her smile ever present. But those closest to her began to notice subtle cracks in the facade, fatigue that lingered, emotional absences that couldn't be explained away, and a growing disconnect between her public image and private well-being. Weight fluctuations became frequent, prompting speculation in tabloids and fan forums, but few suspected the deeper toll that was being taken behind closed doors. Sources now allege that Tamela's schedule was far more punishing than the public ever realized. She was reportedly pushed beyond her physical and emotional capacity, performing with little recovery time between shows, appearances, and studio sessions. Insiders claim that she was often administered medications backstage, sometimes pills, sometimes oxygen, just to keep her going. And still, she sang, smiled, and praised, her suffering masked by the trappings of professionalism and gospel decorum. These weren't minor health concerns. These were signs of a woman burning out under a machine that never stopped moving, an empire that demanded everything she had, even when she had nothing left to give. Compounding the pressure was a culture of silence. The gospel community, known for its unity and discretion, often views personal tribulations as spiritual tests rather than urgent matters of health or autonomy. Friends, family members, and colleagues may have noticed the strain but remained quiet, unsure how or whether to intervene. For Tamela, this silence must have felt like betrayal. She was surrounded by voices praising her strength, yet none willing to question the cost of her sacrifice. In hindsight, many now realize the warning signs were always there. But in a world that worshipped the image of Tamela Mann, few stopped to consider the woman behind it. The Reckoning. A son's courage breaks the silence. Everything changed in an instant when David Mann Jr., affectionately known as Gerb, went live on Instagram, unleashing a storm no one saw coming. What began as a concerned son speaking his truth quickly evolved into a digital reckoning. Gerb revealed years of what he described as emotional manipulation and abuse within his family, focusing specifically on the power imbalance between his parents. In his heart-wrenching video, he portrayed his mother not as a revered gospel icon, but as a woman held captive in her own home, stripped of medical freedom, emotional agency, and even the legal right to make decisions for herself. According to Gerb, David Sr. had assumed control of Tamela's personal and medical affairs, allegedly without her full knowledge or consent. Gerb spoke of forged documents, questionable power of attorney agreements, and a disturbing reality in which his mother's medical treatment, financial choices, and even touring obligations were dictated by someone who no longer treated her as a partner, but as a product. What made these allegations especially damning was the level of detail he provided. From referencing specific medications Tamela had been given to citing exact dates where she collapsed backstage and was quickly revived just in time to sing. The gospel world, typically tight-lipped in scandal, exploded with reactions. Fans were stunned. Fellow artists, once silent, began posting cryptic messages and prayers. Some insiders confirmed parts of Gerb's claims, revealing that whispers of Tamela's deteriorating condition had long circulated within industry circles, but were dismissed or downplayed. Gerb's livestream was more than a family airing grievances. It was a public intervention. It forced a conversation the gospel world had avoided for too long. What happens when the platform meant to glorify God becomes a prison for the very people carrying the message? A mother's breaking point and a daughter's witness. As the dust from Gerb's livestream began to settle, more heartbreaking revelations emerged. One of the most devastating came from an unnamed family insider who described a moment that broke Tamela entirely. After being presented with home surveillance footage, clips she had never seen, or perhaps had emotionally blocked out, Tamela reportedly sat frozen as years of quiet suffering replayed before her. The footage allegedly included scenes of arguments, emotional breakdowns, and moments of isolation so intense they left her sobbing in disbelief. She had lived it, but watching it stripped away all the rationalizations and spiritual justifications that had helped her endure. Her daughter, Portia, was reportedly by her side during this emotional collapse. And it was in that sacred, shattering moment that Tamela whispered the words that still echo across the gospel world. "He's taken everything from me." It was a statement not of defeat, but of awakening. For years, Tamela had poured every ounce of herself into her ministry, her marriage, and her fans. Now, confronted with the raw truth of her own exploitation, she chose something she had denied herself for too long: self-preservation. That night, she didn't turn to her church or to crisis PR. She didn't try to manage the narrative. She simply called 911. That call was the loudest sermon she had ever delivered. Not with a microphone, but with the courage to finally ask for help. Emergency responders arrived swiftly. Witnesses say Tamela was calm, surrounded by family who had long prayed for her awakening. Meanwhile, David Mann was reportedly led away in handcuffs, reciting scripture under his breath as if summoning divine intervention. But scripture, in that moment, could not shield him from accountability. A carefully constructed empire begins to crumble. As news of David's arrest spread, the gospel community was divided. Some couldn't fathom that the beloved actor and minister could be capable of such behavior. Others, however, began connecting the dots. Clips resurfaced from interviews where Tamela appeared distant or hesitant, where her words seemed pre-scripted and her smiles forced. Fans pointed out subtle cues, how she would often defer to David, how she rarely spoke without being interrupted, how her laughter didn't always reach her eyes. What once looked like humility began to look like erasure. What was once a holy union now looked like a long, painful performance. And then came the avalanche. More insiders, former employees, family friends, and even ministry associates began speaking out. One whistleblower, a former assistant in the Mann household, claimed that David frequently handled Tamela's private medical matters without her direct consent. Medical appointments were scheduled, prescriptions filled, and reports reviewed with little to no involvement from Tamela herself. This wasn't just micromanagement. It was, if proven true, a disturbing violation of privacy and autonomy. Additionally, suspicions were raised about a series of insurance policies, allegedly taken out in Tamela's name shortly before her major health collapse. While nothing has been formally confirmed, the timing, combined with her reported ignorance of these policies, raised serious ethical and possibly legal concerns. The gospel community responds with shock and solidarity. What was once a tight-knit gospel dynasty was now unraveling at the seams. Tamela's supporters emerged from the shadows, not just fans, but fellow gospel artists who saw her bravery as a rallying cry. Social media lit up with tributes, messages of support, and heartfelt calls for accountability within the gospel industry. Hashtags like #Stand with Tamela and Gospel Truth Not Gospel Silence began trending, reflecting a growing movement that challenged long-held assumptions about ministry, marriage, and womanhood. One gospel singer tweeted, "Speaking truth doesn't mean you lack faith. It means you've found your strength." Another wrote, "Jesus never told us to suffer in silence. Proud of you, Tamela." As Tamela's story continued to unfold, her silence transformed into strength. She began working closely with legal counsel, healthcare professionals, and family members she trusted. What began as a moment of personal despair quickly evolved into a mission to reclaim her narrative. Not just as a gospel singer, but as a survivor. The case, now under active investigation, has reportedly widened in scope, looking not just into potential financial misconduct and elder abuse, but also deeper into the culture of control that often goes unchecked behind the scenes in faith-based empires. The carefully constructed illusion begins to fracture. For decades, Tamela Mann stood as a luminous presence in the world of gospel music, a voice that seemed to rise from the deepest wells of human pain and transform it into something redemptive. Her songs were not merely performances. They were declarations of hope, offered to a weary world through the lens of unwavering faith. Alongside her husband, David Mann, Tamela presented the image of an unshakable partnership, one built not just on love and family, but on shared purpose and spiritual alignment. The Manns were more than gospel stars. They were seen as modern-day apostles of faith-based entertainment, gracing television screens and pulpits with a grace that seemed effortless. Their union was held up as a model for Christian couples everywhere, an embodiment of laughter, longevity, and loyalty. Yet, beneath the glossy sheen of curated social media posts, award show appearances, and carefully marketed family-centered programming, a far more troubling reality appears to have been unfolding. Recent allegations, now emerging with increasing clarity and force, suggest that Tamela's seemingly serene world had long been unraveling in silence. Those closest to her, former aides, medical staff, and now her legal team, paint a disturbing portrait of a woman systematically stripped of autonomy, manipulated behind closed doors, and used as a vessel to sustain a sprawling ministry empire. The brand, as it was known to the public, seemed to march forward unimpeded by her health struggles or growing fatigue. But within the private corners of her life, Tamela, the heart and soul of that empire, was quietly fading under the weight of control and neglect. Sources close to Tamela's attorneys allege that David Mann was far more than a concerned spouse. Under the guise of protection, he reportedly managed every detail of Tamela's daily existence. From vetting her communications to controlling her access to friends and family, the picture that emerges is one of profound and calculated isolation. Legal documents now under review suggest a pattern of behavioral control so precise, so orchestrated, that it mirrors the dynamics often seen in emotionally abusive relationships hidden behind public success. Allegedly, David intercepted her mail, monitored her personal phone calls, and created a barrier between her and the outside world. Every choice, from the clothes she wore to who could visit her during recovery, was filtered through his discretion. These acts were not born of spousal concern, but appear, in hindsight, as coordinated efforts to manage and maintain the very image that had enriched their shared brand. Even more chilling were the digital communications discovered during an internal legal investigation. Emails between David and their longtime business manager reportedly reveal a far more transactional approach to Tamela's well-being. These communications, allegedly exchanged during one of her more serious medical episodes, discuss contingency planning, not for her healing, but for how her brand could be sustained in her absence. At the heart of this controversy lies a single email sentence, now making its way across investigative circles and social media. "She doesn't need to be on stage to keep the brand alive. We just need the image." These words, delivered with clinical coldness, stripped Tamela of her humanity and reduced her to a commodity, something that could be packaged, monetized, and sold, even if her physical body could no longer endure the burden of performance. Unraveling the insurance trail. As the investigation widened, it revealed a paper trail that deepened the sense of betrayal and raised even more alarming questions. According to leaked internal reports, Tamela's legal team unearthed 3 separate life insurance policies, all signed and activated within a mere 8-week window, just before one of her most severe hospitalizations. Even more troubling was the revelation that Tamela was allegedly unaware of these policies, each named David Mann as the sole beneficiary. With high 6-figure payouts and detailed clauses that extended far beyond traditional end-of-life coverage, the documents point toward a calculated financial safety net constructed without the knowledge of the woman at its center. One policy reportedly included a rare tour disruption clause, an unusual addition that would financially compensate for canceled shows in the event that Tamela became too ill to perform. In the world of high-stakes entertainment, such policies are not uncommon. Yet when paired with the other emerging evidence, this clause felt less like strategic foresight and more like opportunistic hedging. These policies appeared less like tools of security and more like blueprints for monetizing a potential tragedy. If the alleged timeline holds true, David was not only preparing for Tamela's incapacity, he was ensuring that every possible aspect of her decline had a fiscal contingency. This discovery rocked the gospel community to its core. For fans who had followed Tamela's journey from her early days with Kirk Franklin and the Family, through her evolution into a chart-topping solo act, this level of manipulation felt unimaginable. Here was a woman whose very existence was rooted in the sacred, the kind of authenticity that couldn't be mimicked. And yet, behind closed doors, it seemed her voice was being leveraged, her body exhausted, and her legacy pre-written in contracts she never signed. The disappearing voice and the rise of digital exploitation. As if the insurance revelations were not disturbing enough, further scrutiny uncovered an even more dystopian element in the alleged exploitation of Tamela Mann. Investigators revealed the existence of several licensing agreements bearing her signature, documents that permitted the use of her vocals in upcoming gospel music projects, including a now-developing artificial intelligence initiative. According to sources involved in the case, Tamela was entirely unaware of these agreements. Her vocal performances, it appears, were to be replicated using AI technology, allowing new material to be produced under her name without her physical participation or consent. This revelation adds another layer of cruelty to an already unsettling narrative. While Tamela was reportedly confined to her bed, battling fatigue and illness, someone was allegedly approving deals that not only extended her brand artificially, but also risked erasing the soul that made her music resonate in the first place. Tamela's voice, once a powerful living embodiment of faith, was being digitized and sold like any other commercial asset. Gospel music, a genre rooted in the authentic cries of the Spirit, now stood at a crossroads, grappling with how far the industry would go to preserve image at the cost of integrity. The implications of this technological exploitation raise urgent ethical questions not only about Tamela's specific case, but about the trajectory of gospel music as a whole. If a voice can be cloned and a legacy simulated, what remains of the humanity that made it sacred? Who benefits from a ministry that no longer requires the minister? Footage that shattered the illusion. The unraveling of this carefully maintained illusion reached a breaking point when internal security footage was leaked, footage that would ultimately fracture public perception and irrevocably alter the narrative. Captured within the privacy of the Mann family home, the video showed a moment that was both intimate and horrifying. Tamela, clearly in physical distress, clutched her chest and struggled for breath. Her pain was unmistakable, her body trembling, her breathing erratic. But what made the footage so devastating was not just her suffering, but the response it received from the man who vowed to protect her. Rather than offering comfort or calling for help, David Mann was seen pacing angrily, his voice raised in frustration. He accused Tamela of being ungrateful, weak, and dramatic. At one particularly harrowing moment, he walked out of the room, throwing a final line over his shoulder. "You're not going to ruin everything we built because you want to be dramatic." It was a sentence that pierced the soul of the gospel community, reverberating through news reports, online forums, and church pews. The words were not just cruel. They betrayed a chilling detachment. The empire they had built together, once seen as a spiritual sanctuary, now appeared as a prison for one and a monument to control for the other. Cultural whiplash and the gospel community's reckoning. The reaction was swift and fierce. Hashtags like #Justice for Tamela and #Gospelgate exploded across social media. For many Black churchgoers, the Manns had been fixtures, visible symbols of God's blessing and marital unity. Now that symbol was stained. Facebook prayer groups turned into information hubs, while Twitter users compiled timelines, archived sermons, and uncovered moments of subtle manipulation in past interviews. Gospel artists who once stood beside the Manns on stage quietly began scrubbing collaborations from their feeds or issuing vague statements about standing in truth. Perhaps most damning was the silence from prominent church institutions. Megachurches that had long celebrated the Manns, featuring them in conferences, panel discussions, and even sermons on marital fidelity, began to retreat. Pastors who had praised their union from pulpits and book deals offered little more than hollow platitudes. In a faith tradition that often preaches radical accountability, the silence was its own form of betrayal. What emerged in that vacuum was a broader reckoning, a confrontation with how often institutions prioritize brand loyalty over individual well-being, institutional complicity, and the deeper betrayal. As legal teams pressed further, allegations of institutional complicity emerged. According to a source close to the case, at least 2 major gospel tour promoters had been informed of Tamela's worsening health, but continued booking her for back-to-back performances. Leaked correspondence suggested that financial incentives were offered to David Mann if Tamela could remain on tour, regardless of her condition. The pressure to perform was systemic, not isolated. Promoters, managers, even ministry partners, all allegedly participated in a culture that demanded performance over personhood. Tamela Mann was no longer just a woman in distress. She had become a symbol of how far the gospel industry might go to protect a lucrative image. And in that pursuit, the cost was not merely financial. It was spiritual, emotional, and human. Her voice, her identity, her consent, all were compromised in the name of preserving a brand that no longer served her. A daughter steps into the fire with the gospel world reeling. Tamela's daughter, Portia, stepped forward as her mother's fiercest protector. Sources close to the family report that Portia swiftly took over medical decisions, removed all David-affiliated personnel from Tamela's care, and brought in a new team of licensed professionals. In a leaked message to family members, she wrote with poignant defiance, "We're not covering anything anymore. Mama gave her life to everyone. Now she's taking it back." That message resonated beyond the walls of the Mann household. It signaled a seismic shift in who held power and who was finally being held accountable. For the first time in years, Tamela was reportedly able to rest without being handed a microphone. Her recovery, though slow, was steady. Surrounded by family and free from the pressures of performance, she was beginning to reclaim not just her health, but her identity. Her legal team, comprised of two high-profile law firms and a forensic accountant, began preparing civil and potentially criminal charges, alleging financial abuse, medical negligence, coercive control, and elder exploitation. The court filings remain sealed, but insiders describe the evidence as overwhelming. The reckoning within gospel's inner circle. In what may become the gospel industry's most consequential scandal to date, even more explosive findings have emerged. A forensic audit of Tamela's business accounts reportedly revealed $650,000 in unexplained withdrawals over a 14-month period. The expenditures were labeled as pastoral support, travel, and production costs. Yet they bore no relation to Tamela's appearances or medical records during that time. In short, money was being siphoned from her empire without her knowledge. Even more disturbingly, leaked emails show a tech company offering David Mann a $300,000 advance for 3 AI-generated gospel albums using Tamela's past vocal recordings. There was no contract signed by Tamela. Only her digitally forged signature appeared on file. This revelation deeply unsettled many in the gospel music community. Once staunch defenders of David, church leaders and collaborators began to quietly back away. Ministries that had once promoted the Manns as marriage goals fell eerily silent. One megachurch's social media manager told fans, "We are not taking questions at this time." But federal authorities were. The FBI and elder abuse units reportedly began reviewing financial records due to allegations that some of the funds in question may have originated from church donations and faith-based performance fees. If proven true, this could transcend personal betrayal and become a faith-based financial crime investigation of national interest. A storm that cannot be silenced. This scandal is not just about a marriage gone wrong. It is about a gospel institution willing to prioritize image over integrity. It is about the erasure of a woman's voice, literally and figuratively, for the benefit of those around her. Tamela Mann, once known solely for her soul-stirring anthems like "Take Me to the King," is now emerging as something even more powerful. A survivor who dared to challenge the silence. Her voice is no longer just heard through song. It is echoed in legal filings, in testimonies, in whispered prayers for justice. The storm that began in her home has now engulfed an entire industry. And as the truth continues to pour out, it no longer simply exposes the guilty. It washes away every illusion built to protect them. When David Mann's mugshot began circulating quietly online, devoid of the usual celebrity polish, no carefully curated selfie, what remained was not just a fallen man. It was the unraveling of a system. And at the center of it all, no longer hidden behind contracts or scripts or stage lights, stood Tamela Mann. Not as a brand, but as a woman reclaiming her name. A voice of healing silenced behind closed doors. Tamela Mann's music has long served as a refuge for countless fans around the world. Her soaring voice carried messages of hope, healing, and unwavering faith. For many, Sunday mornings weren't complete without her songs echoing through their homes, wrapping listeners in spiritual comfort. From church choirs to gospel charts, she became a household name. A woman whose praise seemed to flow from a place of divine joy. But now, a devastating truth has come to light. That very voice that healed others was itself crying out in silence, trapped behind the gilded curtain of a gospel empire built on image rather than integrity. According to an anonymous investigator involved in the unfolding case, this isn't simply a matter of family disagreement. When you're talking about health manipulation, forged documents, and financial decisions made without consent, especially involving a vulnerable adult, you're no longer in just family court. You're in federal territory, they said. This stark assessment has jolted fans and followers alike. For years, Tamela Mann was believed to be thriving alongside her husband and longtime creative partner David Mann. Together, they built a brand that was rooted in faith, laughter, and loyalty. But behind the polished performances and endearing sitcom appearances was a troubling reality. A woman allegedly being controlled, silenced, and stripped of her autonomy. The crumbling facade, public backlash, and viral revelations. In the early days of this scandal, public sentiment shifted with the force of a tidal wave. What began as hushed discomfort has cascaded into a full-blown uproar. Social media, once a hive of adoration for the Mann family, has transformed into a digital court of inquiry. Pages once devoted to celebrating the couple are now echo chambers of suspicion, reposting interview clips, behind-the-scenes footage, and fiery commentary. One TikTok clip from a 2019 interview has ignited a viral frenzy. In it, David Mann interrupts Tamela mid-answer not once, not twice, but 5 times within 60 seconds. The creator's caption stings. He controlled her words, and now we get why. It's become the rallying cry of critics who believe they're finally unraveling the carefully constructed narrative. Booming in this atmosphere is a gospel singer who once toured with the Manns. In a cryptic social post, she wrote, "There were nights we had to carry her off stage. Now I see why. It wasn't about the Lord. It was about control." The comment struck like lightning. Fans who historically read hope and love into Tamela's performances are now questioning whether those shining moments masked exhaustion, pain, and desperation. Rumors swirl about sudden cancellations, odd disappearances between songs, a fatigue that wore on Tamela's face even when her smile was bright. The signs, it seems, were there, but the myth of celebrity rendered them invisible until now. On Twitter and Instagram, the tone has shifted from reverent to critical. Influencers and bloggers are dissecting patterns. Interviews where Tamela looks downcast, footage in which she begins to speak only to be cut off. Each example adds weight to the growing narrative. This wasn't stage nerves. It was a life overshadowed. The backlash is deep, and the viral revelations are mounting. Behind closed doors, leaked emails and the monetization of her suffering. As whispers turned into headlines, leaking email chains added another layer of shock. These messages, allegedly exchanged between David and a longtime business manager, outlined contingency plans in case Tamela became incapacitated. The emails go far beyond concern. They detail backup strategies to keep merchandise lines rolling, licensing deals active, and the brand intact, even if Tamela's presence faded. In one message, David reportedly notes that Tamela's voice can be replaced by narration in certain content streams. In another, clear instructions about signing over residuals or authorizing third-party approval appear. It feels macabre to read these emails alongside footage of Tamela locked in David's shadow. The idea that her image and spiritual influence might be treated like commodities, intellectual property to be exploited, is deeply unsettling. For those who once trusted the Mann brand, this revelation reads like a betrayal. Faith turned into fiscal calculation, solace repackaged as sealable assets. Fans are recalling the odd timing of product drops, movie cameos, sudden celebrity appearances. All along, there was the business machinery, a tour de force of opportunity. But now, the optics have turned ugly. How much of it was authentic ministry? And how much was choreographed to impress investors, market stakeholders, and fans eager to click Add to Cart? Breaking free. A daughter's intervention and a mother's resurrection. In the storm's eye stands a quieter yet infinitely more powerful force. Portia Mann, Tamela's daughter. Sources say she has become her mother's rock, from caregiver to guardian. In a sweeping move, Portia has reportedly taken control of Tamela's medical decisions, bank transactions, and digital platforms. David's direct access was suddenly cut off. His text messages go unanswered, his requests deferred. Portia has retreated her mother to a secure, discreet location, one that no longer feels like a gilded cage. There's a growing chorus that this is more than just rescue. It's revival. We're told that Tamela has begun to smile in private for the first time in years. She's reading books she loves, laughing at memories, dwelling in calm. One source described her as ingesting silence like a therapeutic balm. That leaked audio clip circulating online has resonated profoundly. a private moment in which she breathes, "I forgot what peace felt like." The simplicity yet power of the phrase says more than any public statement ever could. She was there, and now she's alive again. Tamela will continue receiving medical attention and emotional support, surrounded by a few trusted friends and family. But it's Portia who did the lion's share of sparing her mother, from emotional manipulation, from institutional inertia, and from the public spectacle that often comes with celebrity. Portia's fierce protection rewrote their story, from partnership to possessorship, from second billing to leading advocate. Industry shockwaves, a scandal beyond one couple. What began as a private family crisis has catalyzed something much larger. Industry gatekeepers, networks, sponsors, tour promoters have begun distancing themselves. Reports indicate reruns of the Mann-affiliated sitcoms have been paused, licensing deals are being renegotiated, contracts pulled, and conferences have postponed or canceled events tied to the name. Without formal confirmation yet, gospel award organizations are said to be closely monitoring the situation, readiness palpable in the corridors of power. Artists within the gospel ecosystem are watching tensely. Some whisper that their own experiences parallel Tamela's. Suppressed complaints, financial opacity, the weight of image maintenance over individual well-being. If Portia's team goes public with the emails, videos, and contracts, the fallout wouldn't be confined to David alone. It might reveal a network, from agents to promoters, of complicit actors who either turned a blind eye or silently benefited. Fans are sobbing on live streams. This is bigger than one voice. This is a pattern. I've been in these spaces and I've seen it. Even skeptics are nodding. What they once believed was counsel and care too often looks like coercion and control. The reverberations extend far past the Mann household and threaten to destabilize the foundation that many believed gospel ministry in America stood on. Silence, speculation, and David's retreat. David Mann's silence has become a vacuum pregnant with speculation. Since news of the investigation broke, his social media has gone quiet. No Instagram stories, no tweets, no official "we have no comment." Just blank space, echoing louder than any press release could. His publicists remain unmoved when reached, issuing no statements and declining to confirm or deny anything. Critics on social platforms have mixed reactions. Some argue that silence implies guilt. Others say it's a strategic legal maneuver. But there's consensus that this absence is telling. People comment, "He's letting the court of public opinion speak for him until he figures out his next act." The quiet only fans the flames of speculation. More revelations may be coming. The deeper that silence, the louder the world wonders. What exactly is David hiding? And more importantly, how many others in his world were turning blind eyes? Grace under fire, Tamela's quiet strength in a storm. Amid the turmoil, Tamela's response remains disarmingly calm. She hasn't live-streamed. She hasn't gone on a social media rampage. Instead, she's doing something more radical, letting silence speak. In a text message shared by a family confidant, she's said to have written, "I didn't leave for revenge. I left for survival. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm trying to live again." It's a line heavy with clarity and agency, an invitation to witness not victimhood, but revival. In response, fans are reflecting on their own expectations of women in faith-based professions. How often have we applauded the strong, cheerful woman, but looked away when her facade cracked? How many gospel tours, church events, and red carpets have hidden whispers of exhaustion that masked deeper hurt? Now, with Tamela's voice rising from the ashes, her supporters are collectively asking, are we ready to trade applause for accountability? Prosperity gospel for peace? Conclusion. A new song rising. This is no ordinary conclusion. It is not the end of a neatly tied story, and certainly not a return to normalcy. What we're witnessing is the quiet but powerful beginning of something new. Tamela Mann, once seen as simply a gospel singer, a wife, and a beloved performer, has now emerged as something far more profound. A survivor, a truth-bearer, and a voice for those who have suffered in silence far too long. Her story, once hidden beneath polished performances and rehearsed public appearances, has broken free, and with it, a movement may be taking root. Tamela's new song isn't just metaphorical. It's spiritual, it's emotional. It's the sound of a woman remembering who she is without the noise of expectation drowning her out. For years, she ministered to others, singing lyrics of healing and hope while privately wrestling with pain she couldn't name aloud. She wasn't just giving to others. She was pouring from an empty vessel. And now, as her voice begins to rise again, not just on stage, but in life, it's a call to those who've walked the same tightrope of performing strength while privately falling apart. What Tamela represents now is something raw and incredibly real. The moment a woman decides that survival matters more than appearances, that peace is worth more than perfection, and that healing cannot happen in silence. In doing so, she gives permission to others, not just gospel artists or public figures, but everyday women in churches, homes, and communities, to say, "I'm not okay." And that's the start of something beautiful. Her story also forces a mirror onto the rest of us, fans, churches, media, and the larger gospel industry. How often do we fall in love with the image but ignore the soul? How easily do we accept the polished performance, even when it comes at the cost of someone's well-being? Tamela's journey is not just hers. It is ours too. Because for every Tamela, there are countless others singing through storms they've been told to hide. And as her truth comes into the light, so too must our responsibility to respond. Not with judgment or gossip, but with care, awareness, and a commitment to doing better. There will be fallout. There will be more revelations. But there will also be grace. Because what Tamela has done, by simply stepping into truth, is holy. It is sacred work to reclaim your voice, especially in a world that only valued you for how beautifully you could sing through your pain. Her story isn't one of scandal, but of sacred survival. Not destruction, but transformation. And so now, the music doesn't stop. It evolves. The applause doesn't end. It deepens into reverence. The platform isn't removed. It's repurposed. Tamela Mann isn't performing anymore. She's living, she's healing, she's becoming. And in doing so, she has given all of us a new anthem. One rooted not in perfection, but in freedom. A song that doesn't need a stage to be heard. A song that finally belongs to her. Let's not miss the moment. Let's not retreat into silence. Let's rise with her, in truth, in compassion, and in harmony. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new gospel, one that finally tells the whole story. Your one click can help us keep creating awesome stuff.